Well, good afternoon, good day, good morning. How about that? We have multiple time zones represented, and we're so delighted on C-Suite Networks, Women's Coaching and Consulting Council. Good day. I think we can just say good day, and that covers everything, right? Yes. We are so excited today. We're excited that each of you are here and you're watching the replay. You're here live. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks for showing up. And thank you for showing up for our sister esteemed faculty member, Linda Conyard. So excited. I want to make sure that I precisely spell your wonderful last name. We're going to hear more from Linda here in a moment because our theme today is power. Just curious, could we all use a little more power empowerment right now, more than ever? Yes, yes. So I'm Kathleen Caldwell, founder of C-Suite Networks, Women's Coaching and Consulting Council, and the Women's Success Accelerator. Big time power in that group as well. So I'd like to just show you a couple slides, set the stage, and let's get you involved because we can't wait any longer. We can't wait for more power, right, Linda? You're bringing it. Yeah, good. So
absolutely.
Thank you. So thanks to each of you for being here. Very, very heart-centered. Yeah, love it. We just keep showing up and showing up and showing up. Yeah, there we go. So welcome to you. Today is day 3 of our challenge. First day was the whole thing is about connecting. And I'm Kathleen Caldwell. I mentioned that before, founder of our council. And I just realized that through my entire life, I knew I was powerful, but at so many times in my life and in so many minutes and moments of my life, I've lost my power. And when I lost my power, it's when I felt stuck, confused, maybe ate a little too much super premium ice cream, slept a little bit too much, got resigned about things. And then in the moment, we were talking about this yesterday, in the moment of forgetting that I was powerful and that I had a higher power and I had a power in a sisterhood and brotherhood of people. In the moment of forgetting, I also remembered how powerful I was. Not an ego trip, but more that I get to make choices. So thank you for being here. Thanks. Part of this is making a request to be supported in a community. So I thank you for that. And each of you today, we have got a spectacular program to learn and experience being more powerful. So first day of our challenge was all about connecting with our purpose. The replay is up on our YouTube channel. Whoa, that was a great program, our purpose. Second day yesterday was about connecting with your prosperity. All I can say about yesterday's program is, Annalie, you were there as well. The word delicious comes to mind. It was a delicious conversation, really delicious. And today is all about connecting with your power. And then tomorrow we conclude the week with connecting with our community during C-Suite Network Celebrates. So thank you for being here and participating and showing up. So I'd love to get you involved in our program today. And, you know, I always love to start with a definition because I think it's a way to get us centered and focused and kind of set the context for our program. So who would be willing to help us out by getting your voice in here, using your power to tell us about the dictionary.com version of power? Love to hear you. And even if one person would like to read the noun and another person would like to read the verb, we'd love that.
Nobody's reading, I'll read.
Thank you. We can't wait. We love it.
All right. The noun for the word power, the ability to do something or act in a particular way, especially as faculty or quality. The capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events. And the verb is supply a device with mechanical or electrical energy or move or travel with great speed or force.
Awesome. Thank you. And just curious about the definition here. What stands out for you in the way power being used as a noun, power being used as a verb, like to activate other things? Just curious what stands out for you in the way of power. I love the noun the second definition, the capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events. And I know Linda's going to talk about this in just a moment. Yeah. Yes.
I love the word ability. Right? Because
Nice.
that's where it kind of goes down to, right? It's you have the ability, you have that power within you and whatever you need. So it's you have that ability or capacity. So that word kind of stuck out for me.
Absolutely. And isn't it interesting? Sheila Anderson, branding icon, international expert, that it is all about ability, able, right?
Yeah.
Able and ability. Interesting. What a beautiful word. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. An active word, right? Yes. Annalie, just curious from your perspective, so we can get your voice in here.
Well,
what about these definitions? What stands out for you, dear?
The definitions are interesting, but the subject of power is not something I reflected upon a lot in my life. So I'm here to be sort of curious, because I hear the word, I empower others, I empower this and do that, and it never resonated with me. So the second definition under noun is something I can more relate to. But usually the word power has potentially different meanings. It can be very positive, and I'm sure, Linda, you might address it as well. And power can be used to manipulate, to control, etc. So it is a word that has a lot of potential misleading as well. And so as I said, I've never used it a lot in my articles or in my classes. So I'm just here to learn more about it and see if I can befriend myself with the word.
Love that.
Great.
Love that. Yes. And
Really?
yes. And Annalie, you're perfectly setting this up, as well as Sheila, for Linda's talk. So there we go. Beautiful. So I would love to introduce you to our esteemed faculty member, Linda Conyard. Linda is a spectacular human being, and I'm just delighted to be getting to know her even more. Linda is I love this term, socialpreneur, and she advocates on behalf of collective global healing around the world. And if that is not a powerful place to stand and a powerful place to be, I don't know what is. And I know that she has tremendous expertise around historical, ancestral, through the ages, healing, empowerment, getting our voice out into the world, community, collective community all around the world, sisterhood, brotherhood, any international nationality, ethnicity, race, gender, all of these things, economic, socioeconomic, all of these terms, all of these things are in Linda's purview. So with that, Linda is an author, a speaker, a coach, consultant, and she's also a therapist. Linda, I'd like to turn the podium over to you because you have a lot to say about power. We cannot wait to hear you. And
Thank you,
Cindy
so much.
Chosick. So
Yes,
speaking of
hi,
power,
Cindy.
we have to welcome you too.
Welcome. Yeah, great to see you all here.
Yeah.
And I just want to warn you up front that I'm a non-linear girl in a linear world. So I actually really enjoy like interaction and looking at the phenomenology, which is like, what do I see in the other, and what does that actually mean, and how can we use that in the healing space? So I'm happy to talk, but I'm also happy to engage with you, because that's where the learning is. And you'll often find that, most people I'm sure I'm talking to the converted here already, and I want to acknowledge the wisdom that's already in the room and the wisdom that's already watching. So, I don't think I'm different to you guys. I have a little piece in the puzzle that I add to your little piece in the puzzle. So together, we create and can create miraculous things and help others along their own path. So, and I guess that's where power comes in. Like, really, if we're connected to our own inner power, our own inner guidance, then we have less of an opportunity to go into that more negative place of power, where we have power over another. So we want to use the power as like a place of stability for us when we're relating to others. So that's how I see power. And I see that there's three major disconnects in the world: a disconnect between ourselves, a disconnect between others, and a disconnect between environment. So if we were deeply connected to ourselves and who we really are, not the modified, creative, adjusted self that we've had to become through our lived experiences of trauma or whatever, we all experience trauma, right? And I'm a trauma therapist and a transgenerational trauma therapist, so that's my thing. So if I look at that, it's like if we really deeply connect to who we are, not the responses of what's happened to us or the adjustments that we've made to what has happened to us, then we would not do to others what we do. We would not do to the environment what we're doing. So there's this, I have this analogy of how we're forging forward. You know those icebreaker ships, how they've got that sharp point and they crack the ice, and it's a really nice clean cut in the beginning, and then at the sides and all behind there's this mess of broken ice. It's like we tend to do that as human beings because we can't stop, look backwards and see what needs to be healed, what's the healing path, so we don't continually live into and pass on this transgenerational unresolved collective traumas. So it's, for me, it's like we need to just stop the ice breaking and start to just sit in a little bit of uncertainty, because we all create from our own lived experiences. So we've got our little lenses on, and that comes from our lived experience. And you can tell that, like, we could have 10 people looking at the same situation and then ask them what happened, and we'd have 10 different views and stories, because we actually have the overlay and the view of how we've lived our lives, our own lived experiences. So it's, again, the more that we understand ourselves, the more that we can catch ourselves in our own ways of being that may not line up with other people, the more we're able to sit in what I call our own power. We can be with difference without it impacting our equilibrium. You know what I mean? So we can actually engage with others and not have any sort of, we can allow some of it in even, and we can chew it over, spit out what resonates and what doesn't resonate. And we keep, oh yeah, I can actually resonate there with that person. But when we have like not a solid integrated self, we can get disturbed by these outside differences. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. So when we're looking at power, like what I'd love to ask you is, where do you sense your own power? And please feel free to unmute and speak whenever you have an idea of where that might exist for you.
So Linda, your question is, where do we sense our own power? Nice, nice. Yeah.
And even take a moment, just take a moment to sort of settle into yourself. And it may be something that, you know, you may not have considered, like Annalie was saying earlier, she hadn't really considered power, couldn't really connect to the idea of what power was. So, and we do have power, especially if we sit in seats of coaching and consulting, like we do have that, that higher place. That's whether we take it or whether it's just like the presentation that someone's coming in with some issue. So they're sort of a little bit lower than what we might sit. So there's that perception of an unequal ground. So if we're able to make that a little bit more equal and know and trust that the person in front of us has their own inner power, they may be disconnected from it, but they have that themselves, and then work with them to unravel their own wisdom, inner wisdom, in relation to whatever they're coming to us for. And seeing what, because we don't have to have the answers. And that's the gold, the place of gold, sitting in not knowing and being present to exactly what is, and meeting people exactly where they are, and not thinking that we have to have the answers. Like we have knowledge, of course, but it's like really being able to have that belief that this person has everything within them to be able to create for themselves. So maybe just take a moment and maybe just feel your feet on the floor. Feel the sitting bones in the seat, in the chair that you're sitting in. Just feel that and the weight of your body in your chair. And then just see if you can get a sense of power and what that is for you. Great, Cindy. Whenever you're ready, you've got an idea or a sense of what that might be. Anybody would like to share what their experience was? Hey, Cindy.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I still have an issue with the term power. For me, it's center. It's more easy for me to buy into, and I get there actually very quickly. And I can feel it primarily in my chest, but also in my head and in my guts. And I sometimes refer to it as my own inner world of stability, which is just a different way of using it. And I can connect with it fairly quickly and fairly often during the day now, which is really good.
Love that.
Yeah, and I also know that everyone has it. And just as you said, not everyone connects to it. And one of our jobs is to invite people to get there. Your background as a therapist, of course, and healer would attest to that. That's what you do. And that's what you have been doing very well, apparently.
Well, I love that space, because it's like, I don't have to have the answers for someone else. It's such a relief. It's such a relief, but I can facilitate processes and really feel my reward is like seeing that connection arriving in the person. And being a trauma therapist, you can imagine there's many people that arrive that feel broken, that have aligned with the behaviors that occurs from what's happened to them. So it's an amazing process of making that connection back and going, you have everything, even through what you've been through, you have everything you need to connect with yourself and fully express yourself in the world. Beautiful. Thanks, Annalie. That's awesome. Cindy, were you going to say something?
I was. So this is interesting because when you mentioned power, and I'm still a little unclear. I apologize for being late. I actually rolled out my first complimentary Q&A to the public to write about writing and publishing your book. So Linda, we're a little bit aligned in what we do. So I write books that heal. So I have your vibe, and I've had many they're actually not even like goosebumps, but they're like goose shocks. Like I'll be like, oh my God, that just like a shiver, right? A shiver with a shock when you were speaking. And I'm like, oh man, I'm in my element right now. So, and then I guess in your element could be part of that. My business name is So Connected. So my power, and I never really thought of it as power, and Kathleen always makes us think higher than we can think for ourselves. So I'm just enamored with Kathleen's abilities and gifts to share this with us and make us think in different parallels, I think, or planes even. But when I work with my authors as either their ghostwriter, their book doctor, or their author coach, and I'm really connected and engaged with them, it feels like it could be power. I like what Annalise said when she said it was source, or sometimes I call it flow or connect. It's always a connection, this really strong connection. It comes directly from my chest, like I'm connecting right to your heart. So heart to heart connection. And it is powerful. And it's amazing. It's really amazing. So yeah, I guess that's where my power comes from.
Awesome. That's excellent. So cool and lovely to meet, like-minded people. Like it's just amazing. So it like touches my soul every time. It's like so exciting.
Yeah. Such a pleasure to meet you too.
Yeah, thanks. Sheila, would you like to share?
Yeah, this is so interesting for me. So I have the name of my business is Image Power Play. So I have it in my business name, and I haven't. You're getting me thinking deeper, right? And thinking more about that. But when I work with clients, and when I feel connected with them, is I have an incredible empathy for people. So I feel like that's one of my gifts. I can touch, get in touch with their heart and how they're feeling pretty quickly. And oftentimes people will come to me because they feel like they've maybe lost their power on who they are. They don't believe in themselves, and they haven't given themselves grace. So when I was sitting there, meditating a little bit, the word grace and belief kept coming into my mind and into my spirit. So I'll have to play with that a little bit more, but thank you for awakening something inside of me. I'm not sure what it is yet.
Awesome. Sit in the not knowing. Such a powerful place, the not knowing. It's like, I see transgenerationally, I see all of our societal issues are the result of, unresolved collective trauma that's come down generation after generation. And the risk I think that we all have is that and I'll take the example of domestic family violence in this country of Australia. So for me, it's like when I think about domestic family violence, the government throws a lot of money at this societal issue. There's many organizations that provide services for this issue, yet the stats are showing that it's on the increase. And what I've also noticed is the level of intensity of violence is also on the increase. So for me, it's like, what's not working? But we still continue to have the next person who's been touched by domestic family violence creating an organization, creating a service. But it's like, it's the same thing we're doing. So we're creating out of the same thinking that created the issue in the beginning, even if it's generations back, we're actually creating from that place. So this is where I say sitting in not knowing and being open to like this knowing field that actually gives us information. And the knowing field could be described like, I might come up with an idea and I might think this is my idea, but then all of a sudden I start reading or seeing other people saying the same thing or similar. So it's like the knowing field emerges. So if we open ourselves up to this massive field, then we have the opportunity to be able to be open to potentially other ways of solving societal issues, potentially looking back and how do we resolve this transgenerational repeating pattern. So I'm sure you would have seen in your clients even repeating patterns that they don't see, right? They're not aware of. Would that be true? Hands up. Yes, you would see that in your clients. Yeah. So with the repeating patterns, it's like that's the thread that people can actually go, and start to notice it. And once they see this pattern, then they can then catch it over and over again. They'll just see it everywhere. It's like, if you decide to buy a blue car, you start seeing a lot of blue cars. It's the same kind of thing. When you start to see something in yourself, then you go, oh, there that is again. But often people use that as a bit of a whipping stick to keep them in their story, in their mind. So as a trauma therapist, what I often see is people disconnect from their bodies because that's where the experience of the trauma is. The sensations are very large there, and people often want to move away and out of that sensation. So then there's a disconnect. And this is all done subconsciously, not consciously. And then they go to their minds. And then the mind is what leads their life. So the mind's amazing. I remember when I was studying Ayurveda in about 2004, which is a traditional Indian natural medicine system of health, right? And he said the mind is a very poor master, but an excellent servant. And at the time, I didn't actually understand that. But over the years and me doing my own trauma recovery, it makes a lot more sense now. So if we can get the mind, master the mind, and have our soul and heart leading us, then the mind becomes an excellent resource. But when it drives us, and it usually drives us from our wounded place, from the neural pathway that's well worn in our brain and how we have survived our life, then that's not so helpful, because it's that story that keeps people stuck in their way of being. And that's where they lose their power. And often I'll see in my clients that they're looking external to themselves for what they need. And often the direction is wrong. They need to come back into themselves and start to find like who they are and what it is that they need and how they can give that to themselves. Does that make sense to everybody? Is that aligning, or is there some questions around that ideology?
Yeah, I would like to comment on that. Every time, when you look at history, there is certain trends of certain positions that people take. And I'm very much aware of the quote you mentioned, because I also wrote that about 20 years ago, that I just thought it was fascinating. But I also believe today, with new knowledge, that our cognitive ability has been and is underrated a lot of times. People go into this feeling experience of spirituality and the heart and often don't think clearly anymore. And so I think where we need to go with metaphysics is to combine the intuition and the intellect and make it healthy. And it's going to be an ongoing struggle while we are in this dimension, because we have to weigh this back and forth. But when you were talking, I agree that we have to encourage people to come more from the heart and their feelings. At the same time, I see a lot of developments globally where people get into this feeling spirituality and block out looking at what's really going on in the world and making some very sound, highly educated judgments about what's going on, which means this is our intellectual capacity. So it is an enormous challenge to do what you do, and also to do what I do, to assist people, guide people, be with them, coach people, whatever terminology we want to choose, to really appreciate both of our abilities, our intellect, our mind, as well as our heart.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree 100%. And thank you so much for that. I agree 100%. And it's like, when you're speaking, like for me, the view is that there's an alignment between the spiritual, whatever that is for people, whether it's nature, some form of religion and dogma, it doesn't matter, whatever is their connected place that makes some sense of their meaning in this life and how that, their purpose of being on the planet, really. So that alignment between that, whatever that is, the mind, and then that heart and soul place, because I feel that's where we have the most power, in that connected place. Often then there's not that reactionary experiences. I'm sure you've sort of had that experience of where someone might say something and then there's this reaction in us. And often the actual natural action is, especially if there's, people don't have the insight that you guys clearly have, right? If you don't have that, then the usual direction that people go is external to themselves. So they're projected outwards instead of actually grabbing that opportunity to go, there's something rising in me. What's that? Having that own internal, what I say to my clients often, like, be your own explorer, get really excited and curious around, how do you work? How do you tick? Not worrying about so much outside. Yes, definitely we need to be connected, but get curious about that first. Become like your own best friend. And often through our lived experiences, we have this crazy inner critic that, judges us all the time. And I'm sure you guys have worked through a lot of this stuff. I'm talking to the converted, really. But, when you think about the people that come to us, like, this is what we might be meeting. So in that meeting, acknowledging that we have we do have access to power, and we need to monitor it. Or like Annalie, you're saying, that internal connection, that strength, internal connection, like you have that, and people can be drawn to that because they look for that in themselves. Well, they want it in themselves, but they look externally for it. So then I see, our role is to acknowledge that they have that in themselves and help them to see how to connect.
Linda, could I jump in for a moment?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Everything you're saying is so empowering. And all of you here today, it's so beautiful. And, the thing that is always so curious for me is, as thought leaders, as trusted advisors, coaches, consultants, whatever, we term for ourselves, just job description, so to speak. And we'll do a shout out for our sister, Christina DiGiacomo, who's doing a new body of work of the universe is calling and the universe has a job for you. So the universe is hiring. So we've been hired for what we're doing now in this time. When we're being called upon for counsel and to be powerful, how would you guide us to, maintain our own power and our own sovereignty, and at the same time, empower our clients? So we're sovereign, we've got our empower, they're calling on us for counsel, and yet we don't lose any of our power, but we don't overpower them and they don't overpower us. There's this equilibrium here, Linda. How can we do that?
I think awareness is key, to be aware of ourselves. And like I was saying before, the more that we know ourselves, the more that we can be present to ourselves. And I don't know, but when I'm working with someone, I have very many different spaces that I'm holding as I'm present to the person who's in front of me. So I'm watching the phenomenology, how they're actually presenting their body movements, what might be occurring that they're not aware of. Also, I'm keeping a check on myself. How am I in this relationship? So there's many different aspects that we hold as we sit in front of another, is my experience, right? So it's awareness. And, I watch, like, when is there a parallel process occurring? When is someone telling a story that touches my story? And how can I just park that for myself? I can go, if I need something, I can go to my own supervisor. But just that awareness of ourselves, that we're not, jumping over the fence into like their field, so it's like there's this constant checking on, where am I and where is the other, but just in a conscious way, but just, it's like holding different parts all the time as I'm engaging with that one person.
So beautiful. And, it's what I'm also hearing you say, and this is quite lovely, is that in the roles that we've taken on, thought leader, whatever it is that this is another game to play. It's another awareness. It's another seventh sense, so to speak. This awareness of the power, the energy, the facility, as Sheila brought up a moment ago, the ability, able. So I didn't even quite think of this until today with your talk today, but it's another sense that's very exciting. Yeah. That we can, elevate our senses and raise our awareness to another level.
Yeah. And I really agree with what Annalise said before, because it's absolutely my own experience of that, being connected, using the intellect in the correct way, like having the intellect there, but having it connected to that feeling sense as well. And I think that's what makes it really powerful, that, we are connected in our heart. We're not just coming from our mind only in a disconnected way. So having that whole connection is what makes us powerful, for want of another word, but embodied. It might be embodied. It might be totally connected to ourselves, however we want to frame it up. But it is like a powerful place and people sense it. And some people might want to move away from it because they're not ready to even acknowledge that. And that's perfectly fine in themselves. That's also perfectly fine. So, there'll be people that are drawn and there'll be people that tend to go, oh, there's something that I sense there that I just don't want to actually, attend to, or subconsciously. Peter Levine writes in his book, Waking the Tiger, about reenacting. And it's like how what's unresolved in us actually keeps showing up. And this is part of that patterning that I was talking about before. So it might be, so for me, my theme, when I was doing my trauma recovery and my master's in Gestalt psychotherapy, that part of what I always had to deal with was I was not seen and I was not heard. And it doesn't matter how I might have said something into the group, and it didn't matter whatever it was said, I always heard it as them negating what I just said, because that was my own inner world of being silenced as a child, living in, hidden domestic family violence. And, then my second daughter was diagnosed with cancer when she was 6 months old, ended up losing her sight when she was 3. She survived her experience. But it's like also not being heard in that medical model. Then in her schooling, not being heard in the schooling, like I was advocating all the time, but that feeling of not actually being heard. And that actually, that experience, even though I didn't know it at the time, is a big driving force for me in what I do today, because I see a lot of that as unnecessary trauma. So I give an example of when my daughter, she was about 7 months old when we got into the hospital, and she was tied down on this massive cold slab to be scanned to see where the cancer had gone, basically was what they were checking. And she was crying. You know how babies cry and they just get that red-faced cry, screaming? She did that. And I've got the time of 45 minutes, but I did have a trauma brain. I can't 100% guarantee that, but I've got 45 minutes in my mind somewhere in that scenario. And my husband and I were looking at this screen, and it was a scan. It was like a screen replicating her body. So we were left there just a bit away from them. And there were two nurses on either side of my daughter while she's screaming this whole time while she's being scanned. And on the screen, there were all these little white dots. And I just said to my husband, oh my God, it's all through her. That was my interpretation of what I saw. And then on where the nurses were, like, if there was ever a time I was going to hit someone, it was absolutely that time. It took everything in me not to go and just go crazy on these nurses. But they were talking about their weekend. And I just, like, I couldn't believe, like, it just was such a mismatch for what my experience was in this. Like, my milk was letting down. Like, I was in this absolute state, but it was quiet. I wasn't out of control, like, obviously looking at me, but internally I was absolutely out of control. And, what I learned from that, like, there was a whole other experience with a different nurse. When we first went to the hospital, she came out of oncology. I didn't even register what oncology was. I knew my daughter had cancer, but it didn't like click in my mind. And everything I wanted to do was just run out of there with my baby. I didn't want to stay. I didn't know where I was going, but that flight response I recognize now. And she, out of these doors came this nurse. She had bright red hair, really bright lipstick, and this pale skin, and this beaming smile. And that also didn't compute. It's like, what is this coming towards me? Anyway, she sat down next to me. I have no idea if she spoke, what the words were. I just cannot remember. But she just gave me a hug. And in that moment, something happened inside of me where I knew that I could deal with whatever was coming. So, like, when I look at both of those situations, like this woman who worked in an oncology ward with children, I didn't even know kids got cancer at that stage, and she could still come and smile. She still had presence. And then there were the other nurses who didn't. And I spent a lot of years being very angry at the medical model and the education model until I did my own trauma recovery. And now I can see them. They're not just faces of the enemy. I can see them now as people, and I can get what it must take to be in that kind of environment where there's such suffering day in, day out. And I then got curious about, what did this nurse from oncology have within her that allowed her to be present to the suffering, still the suffering, as opposed to the nurses who couldn't be present. So I just got very curious about that. And as I've gone on studying, I'm still learning, and do not propose to have it all together in any shape or form. I think I'll be a life student of this work within myself. I just got curious, what was it that made it different? And for me, I believe it's the inner connection that people have with themselves, with their alignment with their mind, body, and spirit. So that's where I think that we can be totally empowering to others. And that was just not even, I don't remember words, but it just in her presence and her hug, it just like, I've got this. And I have no idea how I've got this, but I've got this. So not to underestimate your presence and how that might actually empower someone else when you're truly connected to yourself. And what different, you never know. And I've spent a lot of time studying end-of-life care and volunteering in that area. And what that really taught me was how to be present, and how there's often nothing to do except to be present. And even in that connection, something shifts. It's like that paradoxical theory of change, where you stay with what is and you be 100% present to that, then it sort of shifts and changes in its own way and accord. Does that make sense to people? Yeah. Okay. Any questions, comments, disagreements, all complaints go somewhere else. I don't see them. I'm joking.
No, I don't want to be the only one talking. So
Oh, it's perfect. We're round robin here. Yeah, we're round robin. Yeah.
Well, I just want to share that I so much agree with what you're saying, that it is not necessarily what we say, it's just being there. And sometimes a hug or just a smile or just being there is transformational. And I had that experience in the last 2 weeks, that in 3 situations, people say to me, I don't know what you said, I don't remember, but just you being there, I felt so much better, and I had an insight, or I did this or that, and I was thinking, oh my God, well, I haven't done anything, or what I thought I did was irrelevant.
Yes.
You know, so yeah, I agree with you. Sometimes people think, you know, I'm a good luck charm or some sort, you know, because things seem to happen in a positive way often when I just work with them or be with them. And so there is so much we don't know about energy and our heart and our spirit and the transformational ability that we may exude. I don't know. I don't have an explanation model. I can just speculate. But there is something there that when we are in our center, or as you call it, in our power, that transmits something very beautiful and very loving and very wholesome. And so the work that you do, and I know that we're all doing in our own way, you know, is very important. And so thank you for sharing that and doing this.
Yeah, and it's so needed in the world, because it's like we can become discombobulated if we sort of, because a lot of, and I reckon you would see your clients looking external for their power, right? That's where they're looking. But when, like Annalie is saying, I'm sure you guys, Sheila and Cindy, the same, that, you know, when you actually have that presence and you're really embodied yourself, it's like, from a trauma perspective, if someone is reactionary, their body's being charged up, they're into like a fight, flight, freeze response, whatever that might be, they're like, they go up, the charge goes up. So if you're reactionary and you're going up, it's like this, there's never any upness. It's not happy place. But if you're in this presence, like you're talking about, and Annalie was alluding to, she doesn't know what she does, but she just does this thing. For me, I would suggest that, and you can tell me I'm wrong in any shape, kick it into touch if it's not true. But it's like there's some presence and groundedness in you that allows someone else. The only way for someone who's here and there's something that's solid here is down. If we can hold the space, if we can just really acknowledge our centeredness, and I do love that word much more than power, but like it is also acknowledging that there is a powerful place in that centeredness. So it's like they have this place to co-regulate to. They can actually come down from their experience. And, you know, when people are really present to the other, it's like you can see that person and you don't necessarily need to attach the behavior to the person, because that's what often happens in, like, if you think about toxic workplaces, for example, that person becomes the problem, whatever the label of the problem is. So the person is actually hidden, like that human being who's in the mix of this toxic work environment, whatever position they play in that, it's like they're covered over with the behavior. So instead of looking at that behavior is a result of what's happened to this person, whether it's in the workplace or before the workplace, usually it's from like early childhood where we have most of our impacts of how we present in the world. But if we start to go, that behavior is a result of what's happened to that person, it's not who that person is. And if we can take that view, then that person has a chance. You know, I feel so deeply for these scenarios where people are branded as the problem, this situation, instead of being able to say, no, this is what's happening for them and how it's exhibiting. Okay, I get that. I don't understand fully what's going on, but there's a person here and something's happening to them. So that's a much more, for me, heart-centered place to come from, and that understanding. And we only get there, like you guys, with your centeredness and your sense of solidness on the ground. And it can make such a difference. Honestly, it can be life-saving and you won't know it. And I learned that from, working with people who are dying. I never know what my impact is as I sit present to them, and it doesn't matter, but there will be an impact of some sort. So it depends how I show up, as in the potential and possibility of what may occur for that person. So I just want to give an opportunity. I've been rabbiting on for ages here, but I just want to give an opportunity for maybe Sheila and Cindy. If you've got something to say, please, I'd love to hear your voice. And I've so appreciated you, Annalie, with your comments. I agree 100% with what you're saying.
Yeah, Linda, could I jump in?
Yeah.
As we wrap up our time together, with our challenge, I would love to get everyone's voice as you were welcoming. And, let's give an acknowledgement to Linda and just your knowledge, your presence. You've gifted us with your power through your presence. And, as we complete our time together, perhaps your takeaways, each of your takeaways would be so helpful. And if you're so inclined, let's give Linda some acknowledgement, appreciation, and we'll wrap up our time together. How's that?
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That
Yeah.
went fast.
It really did. Yes, yes, yes. As being present always does, right? Yes, yeah. So just curious, what are your, what's your biggest takeaway? And would curious about the healer you see in Linda, because that's really who you are, Linda, is you are a healer.
Mm-hmm. For sure, indeed. I think my blood pressure's dropped too. I've had quite a run here. The last 3 hours I've been on really exuberant calls. In fact, it was my last author coaching call for this one program I just finished. So I was wearing a boa. So it's been ramped up. And then my last call was, what do they call that? The inaugural call. And so I've been like at here and just listening to you and just remember, like, be present, and everything is so powerful. And so thank you. Thank you for sharing your gifts and your wisdom with us. I find there's always something we can learn from each other. And what I found to be beautiful about you is that reminder and that encouragement to just be. And then support. There's so many different ways to support people who are, struggling and things. And I found through the work that I do is that, just like you said, sometimes it's a hug, sometimes it's just being quiet and listening. There was one person I was working with who I couldn't tell if they liked what was happening or not liked what was happening. And after we had a 2.5 hour call of an assessment with her manuscript, she gave me this glowing review. And what was glowing about it wasn't that I was telling her what to do, but I was telling her what to consider. Like, you might want to consider this or this, like giving people options. They say when we could give children choices to make decisions, they feel more powerful and like they have something in their skin in the game. And so I really think that, like you said, pausing, and sometimes it's just pausing to be there for someone to cry. Like, we don't have to fix it. We don't have to pull them up into a hug, but especially on Zoom, I have a lot of emotions come through from my authors in Zoom. And so it's just, I appreciate the reminder and then the encouragement, because sometimes it can get uncomfortable and the dynamics are different. So just thank you so much for just helping me instill again that, sometimes it's just letting them be and being there for them so they can just work through that. So it was really a beautiful session today. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Cindy. And you said something really important there that just made me remember that, often when trauma happens, it happens in disconnection. People use it in isolation. It's not a safe place. So what you're talking about is witnessing and being present to that. So actually the healing is in the connection. It's so, so powerful. We don't realize often. So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, very great insights. Beautiful.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that was beautifully said, Cindy. So Linda, you have such a sense of calmness about you. that I have really appreciated. Like when Cindy said, I feel like my blood pressure just went down. I'm like, yes, right? There's just this whole sense of calmness. And as I've studied executive presence, being mindful of how people experience you, even just on a Zoom call, and that vibe that you're giving off, with your tone of voice, with your body language, your appearance, everything, to continue to be mindful of that, because it sends way more messages than we realize. And so I really appreciated your calmness and that presence that you brought through a Zoom screen, that you can feel that. I can't even imagine what it's like being with you in person. Like, it's got to be phenomenal. And then you talked about being connected and then disconnecting, and about those nurses. And my mom was a nurse, and I asked her one time, I said, how do you deal with end of life with people, right? When you know that they're in their last moments and you're with that family, how does that not get to you? Because I would be the crying nurse all the time, right? And my mom said she had to disconnect. And I thought, is that good? That can't be good. But she had to like disconnect, be, empathetic to the family and help them through it. But I often wonder how that affected her, and she's gone now, so I can't ask her, but I often wonder like how that affected her, like disconnecting from that all the time, and not dealing with it. So interesting.
And I really got that, like, it's the resources and it's uncomfortable, like, sitting in that uncomfortableness, like we want to run a million miles from that. So, I can get it now. And, just, I guess the years that I've worked with people dying, it's like being 100% present to that. And even still, not long ago, I sat with a woman who was dying and didn't want to go, but ended up having the most beautiful death. So peaceful. That's an amazing experience, like an amazing experience for me as well. And, it's like really being able to sit in the uncomfortableness as you see those end of life signs, and just, I guess that's when this connectedness with the self is most powerful, and allowing that uncomfortableness, because separating from our body and our life it's a massive alone experience. Even if there's people in the room, it is like people go inward when they die, because it's that process of leaving this body just as we came in. Like they're both absolutely powerful circumstances, but not expecting it to be ever comfortable. Like if I felt comfortable, I think when I was seeing with someone dying, I would sort of be wondering about myself a little bit, like, what have I done? Like, am I present or not? So great question you had of your mum, and wonderful that your mum said, I disconnected. I had to disconnect. Too much for me. Beautiful. Thank you for that sharing.
And isn't uncomfortable situations, we're dealing with them all the time. So to be present during that, we don't lose our power, we actually become more powerful, is what my takeaway is. Linda, you are spectacular. Thank you. You are. Yes. Annalee, final comments before we take this home.
First of all, thank you, Kathleen, for doing this week. It was very delightful and very inspirational and very affirming. And also, Linda, it's a pleasure to meet you. And I'm really thrilled you are now in C-suite and bring this into the corporate world, where I think that has been needed and is needed for a long time. And so I'm just really thrilled that you're doing that. I'm a minister, and I have been with dying patients, and I have a lot of different experiences around that, and also the experience of discomfort. What helps me to get through it is, and you probably all can relate to that, is a combination of faith and knowledge and love and surrender, because there are so many things that we have no control over. We just can relate back to some sort of divine, beautiful order that operates all the time, and just relate to that and just connect with that in a very beautiful and humble way. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today. It was lovely.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, I just really appreciate your engagement. It's like, that's what feeds me, to like see what's going on with people and get engaged with people. I get so curious about them. And Kathleen, thank you so much, like, for what you do and everything that you do. Like, you're an amazing person, and I really appreciate you. And that's from the bottom of my heart. And I've met some wonderful people in C-suite. I'm so glad that I've found C-suite as well. And I'm sure there's many more that I'm yet to meet. So I'm on the ride and really enjoying that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, yes,
you
yes,
too,
yes.
yeah.
Thank you. So join me in appreciating Linda Conyard. Thank you very much. Beautiful. Thanks for bringing your gifts, your talents, your passion, your wisdom to the Women's Coaching and Consulting Council. Yeah. So
Thanks
with
for
that,
having
we'll
me.
complete our
Yeah.
time. So deliciously lovely. Have a beautiful day. We'll see you on the campus, on the journey, on the ride. Much love to you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.